Welcome to the Matter Leadership Podcast. I'm Dan.
And I'm Travis, and we believe that leadership really matters. And this podcast is meant to inspire the next generation of leaders and to be a resource for people who are currently in positions of leadership.
That's us, Travis. That's you and me.
We're in positions of leadership right now.
We are. So we just got back from Tennessee, Franklin, Tennessee. And more importantly, we've both had COVID tests and we're COVID negative. So I feel like if you're watching this or listening, you're fine. You're going to be fine, right? I don't know how science really works. Are they fine?
Did you actually get your COVID test back yet? Because I paid for the faster test results.
Yeah, I mean, I got the test taken and you got a negative, so I'm just assuming by proxy I'm probably negative. But
so we want to start this podcast episode with a lie.
Well, it's a half truth. It's true for you and not yet true for me. We'll unpack that later. So anyway, we were in Franklin, Tennessee at an event called the Ramsey Influencer Conference, and we both. What should we start? Why don't you start? How did we get there? I mean, other than in an airplane.
Yeah, we flew there, but first we had to drive and park, and then we walked, and then we flew, and then we drove some more.
Shout out to Justin Bowen, my brother, for hooking us up with some plane tickets.
Yeah, hooking us up with the companion pass on Southwest. Well, you actually got a contact on through our Instagram account. This was like back when we were still in quarantine, right? This was May or something?
Back in May. Yeah, I got a DM from someone from Dave Ramsey's team, and to be honest with you, I thought it was fake. I'm sure people listening or you have gotten have you gotten those DMs before, like, hey, try this shirt or whatever, and you're like, oh, that's spam? I kind of thought this was a spam message. It wasn't. So I responded.
But you had heard of Dave Ramsey before, so you knew that at least Correct. It was something legit. Because sometimes when I get those, I'm like, I don't even know what they're talking about.
Yeah, so I had the context of I knew who Dave Ramsey was, but my experience with Dave Ramsey is he does finance, and that he does financial consulting, helps people get rid of debt, and that was my only awareness of his brand. However, come to find out, he also has a leadership part of his business called Entre Leadership, like the what's it called? We used to teach English, like where you put the two words together, like entrepreneur and leadership. There's a word. It's not a spoonerism.
Yeah, it's not a conjunction.
No, it's not a conjunction. Anyway, you Google that while I'm talking. Anyway, so we're invited. Basically, they're like, hey, we'd love to talk to you. At that point, it was just me. They had seen a video I had done for my leadership class during Shelter in Place, one of the Shelter in Place mini lessons, and they said they wanted to talk to me because they thought I would be a good fit for this leadership event they had coming up. So I responded, set up a Zoom call with Amy from Entre Leadership from Ramsey's team, and I told them about what Travis and I are doing, and they thought it was really cool. They invited us to Tennessee. At this point, it was probably May. So fast forward several months, and to be honest, I mean, I'll speak for me. What was the percentage back in May that you thought this would actually happen, like we'd actually go?
It was pretty low. Like when we had to agree and we had to commit to go, and they said they were going to hold it unless everything got shut down in Tennessee. And in my mind, especially being from California, I was like, oh, we got like a 30% chance we're actually going to go.
Yeah,
yours was higher, 30. I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like yours was going to walk there. Yeah.
Hey, by the way, it's a portmanteau, by the way.
Portmanteau! There it is. There it is. Yeah, portmanteau. So anyway, Entre Leadership, portmanteau. You're welcome. Word of the day. So anyway, we ended up getting invited to go, and needless to say, we went, and both of us entered it with just even something different than no expectations. We were uncertain the purpose of the event. We felt like there had to be some sort of catch. We had to pay our way out there, but then once we were there, our food and the event itself was covered, and it felt like too good to be true. And Trav, why don't you talk just a little bit about the event itself, the content, etc.?
Yeah, I will say also that I told my wife before leaving, I was a little worried it was like a pyramid scheme, that we were going to get there and then be asked to like link our brand with their brand, and they were just trying to like build their brand out. But when we got there, we realized that we don't just
throw our brand around willy-nilly like that.
Yeah. Not when you have such a strong brand.
Yeah. We were nervous.
Yeah, I do think that we got there and instantly we recognized that we were just surrounded by very like-minded people who were passionate about making an impact in whatever sphere of influence they were a part of. And we went from there to the Ramsey headquarters and just saw all that Dave Ramsey had built with his brand, a company of just short of 1,000 employees. Who it was almost like visiting like 30 Rock in New York, because they had all these studios where they do their live content for YouTube, their radio shows, their podcast. And we got to see how that company interacted and really kept their brand and their goal at the center of their work. And then there were some keynote speakers. So over the course of the next 3 days, we heard from some keynotes, both from people who are a part of the Ramsey Solutions team and Ramsey personalities, but also from some outside people who came in and spoke to us about how do you really build your key talk, recognizing that we all are given a stage, whether that's 1 minute or 90 minutes, and how do we speak from the core of who we are and our core values and beliefs, and what we want to be about, regardless of how much time we have. I think one of the most impactful sort of like work sessions and keynotes that we had was around the soul branding, which I would say is really putting the human behind your why. And that really led us into some, I would say like profound discoveries for ourselves and our own leadership, but also for us and what we want to accomplish and do with Matter leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, it was really refreshing. I think just on a wider lens, or to like scale back a little bit, I think just being around 50, I think there were 55, 56 attendees, being around people who were very optimistic and hopeful and committed to just wanting to help people, and hearing from these speakers who are putting in the work to actually impact people's lives. I think sometimes, especially during COVID, it's really easy to be cynical, and it's really easy to feel that, I don't know, there's things are pretty hopeless. But being around people, it wasn't just fluff. It wasn't just like, hey, everything's going to be fine. But being around people who were taking these small steps and were just committed to positively impacting people was really refreshing. I think it's really, California especially, it's been an interesting ride, and globally, obviously, just things are crazy. But it was just nice to just, I don't know, listen and learn, and it was very humbling. I feel like in some situations I have a lot to add, and I want to talk a lot, and this was one of those situations where I was instantly felt like, oh, I just need to sit back and listen. Like, I have a lot I can take away from this. I don't know if you had a similar thought.
I did, but can we just pause right there for a minute and say you did talk while we were there. You did have something to add. Let's talk a little bit. So let me set the scene a little bit. I'm going to set the scene a little bit. So I mentioned that we had that person who was talking about how do you really give your key talk, whether you have 30 seconds to 90 or 90 minutes on stage. Like, what is that key talk? So we actually did a speak off where everyone had to give a 3 to 5 minute keynote address, like their key talk. And then that was done in smaller groups, and then those groups voted on one winner that was going to go forward and actually have to present from stage. And remind me, who one of us made it on stage? Who was it?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to remember. I think both of us did great, but I made it to the finals, which was a blessing and a curse. So to back up a little bit, the coaches who did this session called, I think it was the Signature Talk, their names were Pete Vargas and Pat Quinn. I actually posted about the conference, posted some pictures without mentioning them by name, and someone on social media is like, oh my gosh, you got to hear from Pete Vargas and Pat Quinn. So they're a big deal, I guess. And yeah, we had to give talks in the room, like Trav said, and then we didn't find out who advanced until we were back in the main room. They like made this big deal about it, and they called my name, which, you know that feeling where you kind of want to barf and poop at the same time? I had that feeling. So we also didn't know the order.
But it wasn't COVID.
No, it wasn't COVID. That I know of. I'll find out Thursday. But anyway, we had to basically give that same talk again, but this time in front of everyone with Pete Vargas and Pat Quinn sitting literally behind me. and 2 other judges from the Ramsey team who then gave you immediate feedback in front of everyone. So it wasn't like Travis and I were chomping at the bit to win. It was a terrifying proposition.
Yeah. And what was the feedback they gave you?
Feedback, well, I think what's to set this scene, I had to go after this guy.
Wells Fargo, Henry Wells, William Fargo, last name. Walgreens, last name. Wrigley's, last name. Welch's grape juice, last name. Here you are, you think you're buying a product. You are not buying a product, you're buying a name. And what you don't know is while you're making every family rich, you're making yourself broke. So you done went to one family called Wells Fargo and got $200,000 so you can go to another family called Rolls Royce so you can give them money to get yourself a car so you can go back to the hood and see the Joneses and say, look at what I got. Meanwhile, Wells Fargo, their family's sitting up being rich, and Harley Davidsons and Rolls Royce are being rich, and the Joneses are sitting there holding up people's stuff saying, look at what we did and we broke.
So what was your initial impression after Brian went? Did you think, oh, cool,
Brian
Dan
Bullock
gets to go after him?
Yeah, I think you even made a comment to me like, I just know I'm going to be next, like while he was in the middle of belting his song. And you were
I don't
next,
think I have a clip of his song.
I felt bad for you. Yeah, I felt bad for you.
I literally wrote on a piece of paper, I'm out of my league, and passed you the note.
He followed another woman who gave this amazing talk. She was a brand new mom, and it was this appeal to... she talked about deadlines and lifelines and how moms are a lifeline. And as a brand new mom, I mean, she had people in the audience crying. She was crying. And I was like, now Dan's going to go and tell a joke about watching Paddington.
Which, yes, I did. So, yeah, she goes, and then Brian goes, and then I was like, I just know I'm up next. I was like the 6th person. So I go up there. I was super nervous. The primary feedback, I can put the audio of my speech at the end of this. But basically, the primary feedback was I pace around a lot, and they're not wrong. You can actually, I watched my speech in fast forward, like zoomed through it, and I'm moving all over the place. I probably got 10,000 steps in on that stage. And then the other feedback was just about dead ends, and I think that's super important and it was something that honestly I was very aware of. Even just preparing the speech, we didn't have a ton of time to like dial in the speech after, like, and by not a ton of time, I mean very little time. We knew at this conference we'd have to give a talk, but then they explained essentially the directions and the format for giving in this effective talk. And anyway, I felt the dead ends even going into the talk, which is not a great feeling. Like I wasn't like, oh, this is a dialed in speech, but I think I'm not often out of my comfort zone, and I'm not often, I don't know, like I said earlier, I feel like in a lot of situations I have the ability to give insight or I'm looked at as, oh, what does Dan think of this? And it was honestly refreshing to have that sick feeling in my stomach of like, I'm out of my league. It's a much better feeling, or I think a much more helpful feeling for me than had I walked away from that conference like, oh, like, yeah, it was nice. Or I feel like I already, I had all this under control going into it. So the speak off was fun. I did not win, but I didn't even vote for myself. You didn't vote for me either, which was somehow more painful. But anyway, it was fun. What, as far as like takeaways for you let's go individual takeaways and then just a matter leadership, like for our brand that we were not going to merge with them because of our strong brand presence. That was a joke. Yeah. You didn't smile.
Yeah.
Which is kind of like my speech.
It was kind of like your speech, yeah. I'm laughing now, though. So I don't know if you'd rather have someone laugh in the moment or laugh continually after. Think of how much more joy you brought with the continual laughter.
It's a great point.
Yeah. For me, there were a lot of individual takeaways. I think one of the biggest individual takeaways was really honing in on my own personal values and beliefs and how that shapes my identity, and then how I bring that identity into my own spheres of influence and impact, which I think then ties into the work that we're trying to do with Matter Leadership. But really...
Can I ask you a question about that?
Yeah, I was going to keep going, but ask me a question.
Thank you.
It might be where I was going to go anyways.
No. It felt like a no. What is one of those core beliefs that you feel like you don't demonstrate enough in your leadership?
Yeah, so part of what this workshop and sort of like keynote presentation did was it walked through what some of those questions we should be asking ourselves to get to some of those values and beliefs. So some of those questions included things like, what happened in your backstory that drives your passion, or what's something that makes you angry in the world? And one of the questions was actually what matters to you, which I thought was appropriate for Matter Leadership, because I do believe that leadership matters. And the reason why I believe that leadership matters is I believe that I see it in adults, and I see it in high school students specifically as they start entering into their own identity, that they're allowing their identities to be informed and shaped by culture and by their friends and their community, and not really allowing their identity to be shaped by how they've been uniquely created with their own giftings and passions and talents. And that's something I felt deeply as a high schooler. I remember wanting constantly to be someone else. I didn't want to be myself. I wanted to be someone else. And so I would like to, that's part of what drives me, is how do I help people step into how they are uniquely created, with whatever that innate gifting might be, or whatever talent they've worked and developed over the course of their life, however long that's been, that they can use to then have an impact in the world and help other people walk more fully and authentically into their identities. So that's an example of like one of those core beliefs. And part of that workshop in Keynote was to really identify a few of those core beliefs, and then how do you kind of mold that into a soul brand, or a brand that really is human-centered and focused.
Yeah, that's great. I think for me, an individual takeaway, it kind of overlaps with the Matter Leadership takeaway, like the brand takeaway. It's knowing what you stand for, and knowing what you want, or what we want the brand to stand for, so to speak. We had this funny situation where we were on an elevator, and we were with, shout out to His and Her Money. They have a great podcast, and we were in the elevator with them, and we asked them what they do.
Yeah, this was actually so funny.
This is great. So we were going down or going up 6 floors. It's all a blur at this point, but we were in
Also,
an elevator.
I love that your directional challenge, you don't even know if we're going down or... We were going up. We were on the bottom floor going up, yeah.
Perfect. So we were going up, and we pressed 6. We were riding with them, and we're like, what do you guys do? And they were like, oh, we are a husband and wife team. We have a podcast. We help people with their finances. They were much more eloquent than that, but they were very succinct. They had like a very clear response. And Travis and I did this thing at the conference where we would kind of point to the other person when someone would ask what we did, just so we each had a chance to like articulate it. And Travis points at me to say, because they asked us, like right after they finished their eloquent and succinct explanation, they asked us, what do you guys do? And I fumbled through an explanation of what Matter Leadership does, and then the doors opened to the elevator. So we've talked about elevator pitches, and a lot of people are probably familiar with the concept of an elevator pitch. Like if you had 30 seconds or less to basically sell an idea, you need to have it ready to go. You need to have it like in that box. And I blew it. I blew the pitch. Travis called me out in front of the couple. They laughed. And honestly, though, for me, a helpful realization at that conference is to be able to clearly, I guess, define what it is that we do and what that is that we want to do. And to be honest with you, I think you and I kind of had a sense of that going into it, but I think that our direction has changed since the conference in a way we're both excited about. And I'm okay, honestly, not even having a completely concise answer for that yet. But I think moving forward, before we can really make some of these big steps we want to make, I think it's super important to have that elevator pitch ready to go. So I think just being able to communicate clearly and succinctly is something I saw a lot of people do effectively there, and I want to do better.
I don't know that you effectively communicate right now that you literally were in an elevator and did not have your elevator pitch down. Like, that's what was so funny about it. We've asked on our podcast,
the
like,
literal moment.
hey, pretend you're stuck in an elevator, or you're riding in an elevator up with someone. What would you say you do? Like, you that happened to you. You don't need to pretend anymore. It happened, and you failed.
Yeah. Okay.
But
I feel like we're just piling on now.
Yeah. I do want to. Oh, sorry. Yeah, it does feel like
okay.
I'm being a little mean. Yeah.
No,
I do want to add
fine.
to that, because I think part of what came out of our time there at Franklin and really taking everything we had learned. And we spent a good hour and a half or so on the plane ride back, kind of redefining part of what it is that we want to do with Matter Leadership and trying to hone in on our own essential soul brand of Matter Leadership. And I actually think like we were maybe a little misaligned on what we were trying to accomplish. And it was really cool to be there and get to experience that together as we try to move this forward and have something that we actually think does matter and will make an impact in our communities and hopefully beyond. So I think that was actually really cool as well for us as a brand, as Matter Leadership.
Yeah, I think it's funny too. We get along really well, and I think that it is funny when we have some of these conversations where we're passionate, but we're still trying to sort through things where we like argue a little bit. And even just like sitting next to each other on an airplane arguing or sitting like angrily whispering during the conference. I feel like there
through
was
our masks, like angrily whispering.
Where you can't see facial expressions other than eyes. But I think that is helpful, and I'm glad we were able to not just like placate each other with, let's try that. Because I think we even did some of that early on, but not because we were trying to placate necessarily, but because we were just like, I think that'll be fine. Like, let's do this thing. But I think we both came to a place where over the next 3-4 months, probably stay the course with what we are doing and what we've mapped out. We have several podcast interviews we've already done and things like that we're going to post. But I think we're excited for this next direction, and we're aware of the amount of work that's going to have to go into it. I think just a kind of a closing takeaway is all of the people there who had achieved any measure of success had a track record of working really hard. And that one of the first things they said at this influencer event was, you're not going to get discovered. There's not going to be like this moment where, and I think a lot of people are looking for that. And I think even to a certain extent, I might have been looking for that. But I think it's really a good reminder that it takes a clear vision, like firm beliefs, and a strong work ethic. And I'm excited though for those next steps. Any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I would echo what you said, and I think one of the phrases that they said often was, there is no there, meaning like you're never going to actually just arrive. So even when we feel like we've reached some pinnacle of success with Matter Leadership or whatever it is that we're doing, it's never going to be like, oh, now we're done. And I think that's part of when you have an effective, human-focused goal, there's always more work to do. And the other aspect of that is that we fix forward. And that was a phrase that I heard that really stuck with me. We have some podcasts in the queue that we're still going to publish that I don't necessarily think, they're still great podcasts and there's good content there, but we've talked about maybe some things that we need to shift or even like add into our podcast or take away from our podcast as we really hone in on our core values and what we want Matter Leadership to be about. But that doesn't mean we stop everything that we're doing. We're excited to continue going and just fix forward as we take our learnings from this conference and this event and fix forward.
Yeah, I think our next steps include continuing the podcast and tweaking it a little bit, but also we're excited to build out curriculum that I genuinely think is going to help not just leadership teachers, but teachers apply leadership principles in their classroom. I think one of the things that we kept having to explain over and over to people that we met not from California was what a leadership class even is. So it allowed us to realize, hey, like our scope is a little bit different and our focus needs to be a little different than it was. So super excited. One last shout out is just to the whole Ramsey team. It was incredible just to be around these inspirational people who are so committed and principled. And the closing keynote was by a guy named Dr. John Deloney. He has a podcast, and I think he really closed the conference really well in terms of the idea of like your own personal health is tantamount to any sort of help or benefit you're trying to be to someone else, that you need to essentially work on yourself before you can help others. And I think that's such an important reminder. So we're super thankful and grateful for everyone who is listening, and also to the Ramsey team who invited us out there.
Yeah, and make sure to check out their podcasts and their resources. They have some really incredible resources. But when you're online doing that, we also would ask that you check out our website for more content and resources at matterleadership.com. Thanks for listening.
I was watching a movie the other day with my kids and my wife. We're sitting on the couch. Movie ends, and I'm crying. And they look at me, and they've seen me cry before, but they're like, "Dad, why are you crying at Paddington 2? My wife doesn't call me Dad. She said, Dan. And have you guys seen Paddington 2? Yes. Okay, it's amazing. If you have not seen it, this isn't just like speaker hyperbole. It's incredible. Sorry, a little spoiler. End of the movie. He's just as woken up from a coma in 3 months after having been in prison. I'm not joking, look it up. And he wakes up from his coma, and he looks around the room. He's in a room. And as people are, and bears. And in this room, there are these people from his life who he's made an impact on. He has family members, he has neighbors, he has friends. And the reason this struck me, not because this bear had made impact, but because he was living a life that I want to live, where people would be surrounding me saying, "Hey Dan, you made this impact on me, and you furthered my life, you made my life better." About 8 years ago, so my son's 13 now, when he was 5, he brought home one of those typical like kindergarten papers, like answering questions like, "What's your favorite food?" "Pizza." "What does mom like to do?" "You wrote laundry." "She does not like to do laundry." And then my wife's reading it out loud, and the next question is, "What does Daddy like to do?" And he wrote, "Daddy likes being away." And that gutted me, because Daddy does not like being away. But to be honest with you, at that point in my life, any opportunity I had, I took. If it was going on a trip, I do film, I would go film something. I was very, very focused on my Instagram following. I was trying to build Instagram followers. I was trying to build my Twitter following, like all of these things that were very quantitative. And that was such a wake-up call for me, through a series of wake-up calls, to be honest. But having my son say, "Daddy likes being away, likes being far from me." And there's these two words that we use kind of interchangeably, and they're further and farther. But if you look at the actual definition of those words, it's quite different. I think as influencers and people who are trying to build a following, we focus on these quantitative things, and that's what farther essentially means. It means like going a far distance. It means how far can I take something? It's quantifiable, it's measurable, whereas further is more qualitative. It's a measure of degree, or to what extent. And I think in my head, the type of person I wanted to be, the type of leader I wanted to be, was someone who was more focused on furthering the people around me, making people better. But in reality, what I was doing was trying to take myself farther. And what I did with that was I had a series of difficult conversations with my wife, and I decided to make some changes. So the first thing I did, I got rid of my Instagram account, not like deleted it from my phone, but I deleted Instagram, my account gone. Deleted my Twitter. I got rid of my smartphone and went back to a flip phone. My friend Travis is here, I'm terribly directionally challenged. So it actually became a matter of life and death for me to get a smartphone back so I didn't get lost anymore. But it was these series of steps that I had to take because I wanted to be someone who was focused on going further with the people around me rather than farther. Because if I was only focused on going farther, in reality, not to use the word twice, but it would only take me so far if I wasn't furthering the benefit of the people around me. There's probably some parents in here, but the whole distance learning thing's kind of wild, right? I'm a teacher. It's probably why I like the whole further, farther thing. I was an English teacher. And I've been doing distance learning at home as a teacher, and also one of the benefits of it is I get to see my kids in their school environment, this weird, I don't know if we call it school environment, but my daughter's in kindergarten. She's 5 years old. And I like eavesdropping on her. I guess it's not creepy when you're a parent. If you're not a parent, you're eavesdropping. So she was, the other day, anytime I hear her teacher say her name, I perk up a little bit. And she's a third child, a little bit wild. And I heard her teacher say, "Hey, Bryn, what was your answer to that question?" And then I hear what the question was. It was "Bryn, what do you like to do?" It was, "Bryn, what do you value? What do you love?" And I was waiting for it. I was like, she's gonna say me, or she's gonna say mommy. She said crayons. I'm like, oh, great, cool, crayons. But then they asked a follow-up question. The teacher was like, who's someone you love and what do you love to do with them? And she said, my dad. I love my dad. And I love to play games with him. And for me, I think it's so hard sometimes because we're so focused on those quantitative, measurable things. Like how we've talked a lot about money this week. We've talked, it's not a week, it's 2 days, but it kind of feels like a week. And we've talked about all of these things that can be measured, but what can't be measured, what can't be put on a resume is the influence we have on the people closest to us. And in my opinion, if you don't have a focus on the influence on people who are close to you, then what is it all for? So when she said that, although it couldn't be put on a resume, that to me was the biggest barometer of I've been successful with her. And so my challenge to you is, what are you focusing on? Are you focusing on going farther, or are you focusing on going further? Thank you.